experiences that you remember from your childhood. Number 2, for people of a certain age, is you watched Cosmos when you were a kid. And number 3 is I watched Star Trek as a kid. And the truth is there's no science in Star Trek. I've gone through and watched all the original series and taken notes on every single scene of those many hours, and there's almost no science in that show. But the idea of potential, right? And the idea that you can be part of something that is aspirational, noble, almost spiritual in nature is very powerful stuff. Right now we're going back and looking at all of the research from the 70s. In the 70s there's kind of an apex of doing research on comics and their use in the classroom. And that got dropped for about 20 years, so we're thinking about bringing that back. And I'm also very interested in the use of gaming as therapeutic interventions with students who have anxiety disorders and who are on the autism spectrum. So anyway, my thing that I'd really love to do is to figure out why it is that some people are so naturally very good at science and other people struggle to be able to do science, and how you could move these people who are struggling over into being able to do it without causing them pain or anxiety, right? So I was really grateful when the National Academy defined what it meant to be scientifically proficient, because we talked for a long time about critical thinking, scientific thinking, all these things, and we never defined those terms, which is why we never move forward. So they defined it, and I'm interested in these things in yellow. There are lots of people who look at students' scientific knowledge, but I'm interested in how students learn to do science. So what I realized in graduate school, my working theory is that natural scientific talent is heavily reliant upon a person's spatial reasoning abilities. And that doesn't, at its face, seem to make sense to a lot of people. But when I went and talked to a lot of the neuroscientists who work on spatial reasoning, they looked at me and they said, well, yeah, obviously, of course it is. Anything that's complex, where your brain has to move around pieces and see how they all fit together, like creating a research project, relies on spatial reasoning. But it's nearly impossible to prove, right? And I don't have enough time in my life to wait around for that data. So I'm just working on the assumption that these 3 things are required for a person to be good at doing science naturally. And then I can create some kind of teaching intervention that helps students who don't naturally, like working memory is not something you can improve. Whatever you were born with, that's what you got. You can get it, it can be damaged in some ways, but there's no way to improve working memory that we know of. Spatial reasoning can be improved in certain situations, but it turns out if you get good at spatial reasoning over here and you come over here to do this other kind of task, it doesn't help you at all. So how can I fix these things for students? And we came up with this set of labs called backwards faded scaffolding labs. We ran them, and then our thought was to see if they work. And to me, I could be wrong about this, although I will chop off my left foot if this is not true. I'm so certain of this. But let's just say I'm wrong and footless. It's okay. If they work, I don't care. I just want it to work. So we've done several dissertations. It had 4 different students do dissertations on it. We measured it using a really nice tool for measuring students' or anybody's understanding of how science is actually done, and mostly it was positive. But we found out that there were some things that are so entrenched in our thinking that even if students did 15 weeks of, like, let's say for instance, the belief that science is something where you create a hypothesis and then you run experimental control setup and you come up with yada, yada, yada. That idea is so entrenched in people's minds. And there's probably a lot of reasons for that, but even if they've done an observational science for 15 weeks, at the end of it, they still don't know that science doesn't require a hypothesis. We've done such a great job of putting those scientific method lab posters up in every classroom around the country and putting it in the front of every textbook. that we've convinced people that you must have a hypothesis in science, and you don't. In fact, probably about half of the sciences are not experimental in nature. Only 1% of physics and astronomy research papers that are published in the best journals are experimental in nature. Only 1%. So we've had to go back and redesign those things based upon this new knowledge, and we're still working on it. But that same framework brought me to this, right? When I was first brought to Hawaii, I encountered some folks, and I looked at the navigators on the Hokulea and the Hikialea, and I went, wow, these guys may be the best spatial reasoners that the human race has ever created, ever. And as it turns out, they are the example of great spatial reasoners, great spatial intelligence. So this guy right here, I've been very lucky to, through this process, encounter some amazing people. So this is Clay Pavilion. He's one of the original 5 pole navigators, and he's been a dear friend. We're working on a book that has got all the navigational astronomy that the modern wayfinders, Hawaiian wayfinders, use. And that's important, because wayfinders don't use the same astronomy that farmers do, or that religious orders do, or that fishermen do. Hawaiian astronomers have, or the Ho'okelewa have their own astronomy that they use. So this is all the stars and how you use them, which is pretty cool. And then this book that was written back in the 70s was a National Geographic, funded by National Geographic. It was Ben Finney's book on how the whole process came to be. I was working with him, and he passed last summer, unfortunately. So I'm working with his son to republish and to integrate all of his research that he did. So that's been super cool. And this, I don't know if any of you guys, any of your older folks know this lady right here. She's Dr. Ruby Light Johnson. And she wrote the Nainoa Hoku book back in the 70s. So we've worked on getting that book updated and republished, and now working on the second version of that. And I'm just really super blessed to have been able to be part of this, because I think it's the coolest thing ever. Here's the prize for, I'll go back and figure out who's closest. So we made posters. As far as I know, it's the only one in the world. These are the stars that the Hawaiian navigators use. And I know it looks like nothing. It looks like a silly poster with the names of stars written on there, right? It doesn't seem like a lot, but this has just been years of my life getting this knowledge from other people and getting their permission to put it all in one place. And I can send you guys copies of this poster. I was out of them, because we're putting them in all the classrooms and all the libraries. But I can send one to whoever got closest to having the right answer on the pension lab. So I don't know if anybody had any questions, or I've spoken perfectly to be out of time.
We can take about 8 minutes of questions, and we'd love to have questions from you, particularly the students.
So what's spatial?
So have you ever noticed how some people are extremely good at putting together puzzles, and some people couldn't put together a puzzle if their life depended on it? I don't know if you've ever watched the game Survivor, the TV show. When it's a game where these people they're stranded on an island, and there are tasks that they have to do. And after a while, the group figures out that when there's a puzzle to do, there are some people you do not put on that task, and there's some people you always put on it. And it turns out your brain, we were talking about your brain comes kind of hardwired with certain knowledge. You also have little clumps. You have clumps of neurological structures in your brain that allow you to do certain tasks really well. And one of the most important ones, probably really related to people's overall generalized intelligence, is their spatial reasoning ability. And it turns out that it's pretty solid state. I mean, in the sense that, not in the solid state, it's pretty solidified. You can practice at one thing that requires spatial reasoning to get better at it, but it doesn't help you in other tasks. So, like with the navigators, so it's not winter time, because why would you go sailing in wintertime. It's fall and you're coming back, right? The boats are coming back from Tahiti. What's amazing about the Polynesian navigators is where in the West, we broke up the sky into 88 small little constellations. Polynesian navigators have broken up the sky into 4 constellations. This constellation, Akalupe, goes from the north all the way to the north sky, all the way to the south sky, right? It's one thing of stars that you follow. So, Kalepa can see this star. Kalepa can see this star, Kukaniloko, coming up here, right? And in his brain, he can look at that star rising up and he can say, okay, so I wanted to be going in that direction. I got these marks on the canoe. That star is not coming up where I wanted it to come up on the canoe. So I've been going this far in this direction. Now I'm going to turn my boat a little bit in this direction. Now I need to go this far in this direction in order to make up for that, to get back to where I thought I was going to be. And then I'm going to move my boat again. And he does that calculation like that. And then he watches the star come over and sees where it sets, right? Because in the tropics, this is not true once you leave the tropics, which is why when the Westerners came, they could never understand. They could not believe what Polynesian navigators do. In the tropics, where a star rises and where a star sets is the same no matter what latitude you're at. Once you leave the tropics, that game over, which is why the end of the settlement of islands at about 23 north, right? In fact, if you go out to those islands there's little constructions that basically say, death, go no farther, turn back, turn back, turn back, because the navigational system breaks down, right? Same thing on the south side. Anyway, he keeps all of this in his mind at one time, as images, not as thoughts, right? And he does it from the moment, like in the movie Moana, where it says, the song says, we know where we are, we know who we are, so we go out, right? And so we're never lost. The navigators actually do that. As long as you can keep in your mind all the places you've been and everything your boat's done, you're not lost. But as soon as you can't keep track anymore, you got to backtrack to where you were, right? Anyway, so it's incredibly complicated spatial information that they're keeping inside of their brains at one time on a boat that's in motion, like against the wind and the waves and only eating fish, and the intelligence required there is off the charts. So I don't know if that answers your question. It was way more than that.
Like if we take that down to like simpler things, like for me the first thing I imagined is like when you first learn how to drive or when you have a car, it's like understanding how big your car is when you're driving, or it's like when someone's playing a sport and you're playing basketball, like little positions you can recognize, like placement. So is that what like spatial like having good recognition of that?
It's even when you're in the grocery store. Have you noticed, like, sometimes I watch people in the grocery store in the mall, and some people have exceptionally good understanding of their own body in space, and some people have no idea where their body is in space. They're just plowing along. So there's about 7 or 8 different kinds of spatial reasoning. One is like that. One is environmental reasoning, which is your ability to conceive of things that you can't see with your own eyes. One is your ability to rotate things. The other is your ability to imagine that you've moved around the thing. There are all these different skills. Some people are great at putting together Legos, right? When you go to put together the Lego, it gives you a map of what you're supposed to do, but it only shows you one side. Do you know what to do to the other side? Some people do and some people don't, and it's fascinating to watch. So, my son's older now, so he's not playing with Legos much anymore. But I'd watch him when he was 4, be able to look at the map on the Lego thing and put together the other side. And I'd watch my husband try to figure out how he was doing it. And bless his heart, my husband could not put together a Lego build for nothing. He just couldn't do it. But when all the Legos are out on the floor and you need to find that one tiny little red piece or the one tiny little blue piece, my son can't find it, and my husband just goes, choo, and picks it out. So that's a disembedding task. And this requires disembedding a lot, right? When you're out there on the ocean, there's 1,500 stars up in the sky. How did you pick out the one you need, right? Some people can and some people can't. You can kind of get better at it with lots and lots of practice, But I think a lot of the great navigators just look up in the sky and they go, oh, you know, there's off right there. You just do it. And others go, oh, I don't know, it's a lot of stars. So.
Thank you.
Anything else? We done?
Thank you.
It has been a pleasure.
So what we're going to do is we're going to go over to get lunch.